This conference will now be recorded.
I'm going to go ahead and read the emergency declaration and then call the meeting to order. Due to the nature of the declaration of a state emergency due to the novel coronavirus COVID-19 and pursuant to code section 2.2-3708.2, this meeting is to be held by electronic communications via the web platform GoToMeeting. The catastrophic nature of this declared emergency makes it impractical and unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, and the purpose of this meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the public body. That being said, I'll call this morning's meeting to order. Ms. Vigil, could you go ahead and do the roll call?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Good morning, TAC members. If you would all please unmute your mics. I will be calling jurisdictions as well as agencies, primary and alternate members as a record of attendance. I will start with Stafford County, and Mr. Chair Osiak has called the meeting to order. He is present. Is Mr. Brian Council present? Mr. Jason Towery.
Here.
Thank you. For Spotsylvania County, Paul Agnello, first Vice Chair.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Rodney White.
Present.
Mr. Jacob Pastwick. Mr. Leon Hughes. For the City of Fredericksburg, Mr. Eric Nelson, second Vice Chair.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Bassam Amin. For VDOT, Ms. Michelle Shropshire.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Stephen Haynes.
Present.
Mr. Jim Panicello. Mr. Dan Grinnell.
Present.
Is that present?
Yes, present.
Thank you. For Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, PRTC, Dr. Bob Schneider.
Present.
Mr. Joe Stainsby. For Caroline County, Mr. Mike Fincham.
Craig Pennington here for Caroline County.
Yes, Mr. Craig Pennington, thank you. King George County, Mr. Nick Miner. Ms. Kimberly Wilson. For GW Ride Connect, Ms. Kate Gibson.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Linda Millsaps. Ms. Lee Anderson.
Here.
Thank you. Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transit, DRPT, Ms. Sierra Williams.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Todd Horsley. Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, Mr. Ivan Rucker. Virginia Railway Express, VRE, Ms. Sonali Soneji. Ms. Christine Hefner.
Here.
Thank you. Fredericksburg Regional Transit, Ms. Jamie Jackson.
Here.
Mr. Aidan Quirk. And that is all for roll call. You have a representative from each jurisdiction and therefore a quorum is present. You may all now put your mics back to mute.
All right, thank you. Next, we'll move on to item number 3, which looks like we have a little minor technicality there, which should be approval of the November 9th technical advisory agenda. Does anyone have any additions or deletions to today's agenda?
So Alex, this is Paul. I had one minor edit. So this is on page 3. And the edit is basically the amount of approved funding for the Susquehanna County Route 1 Market Street project is listed as being 1.2 million. It's actually about 1.12 million.
Are you referring to last month's minutes?
October 21st.
Okay, yeah, we're just trying to today's agenda.
Okay, yeah, sorry. No, I have no additions for that.
Is there anyone else? All right, hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and approve the November 9th TAC agenda. All those in favor?
Second.
Say
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we'll consider that one approved. All right, moving on to number 4 for the approval of the October 21st TAC meeting minutes. Paul, do you want to go ahead and insert your comment now?
Yes, this is on page 3. Basically, the edits are basically one that the amount of funding should be 1.12 million instead of 1.2. And then the project is the Route 1/Market Street project. That's it.
Okay. Does anyone else have any additions or modifications to the minutes?
This is Eric. Move for adoption.
This Paul
As
second.
correct.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor with the adoption of the minutes as modified, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we'll consider that item approved. Moving on, number 5, review of the October 26th Policy Committee. Adam, I imagine you have a pretty short review on this one.
It is a pretty short review indeed. Just a couple notes from the October 26th meeting. So we did, of course, approve the hiring of the new FAMPO administrator, who you see and will meet in just a moment. And then we also intended to take the proposed 6-year layout for CMAQ and STBG that was approved by the TAC, but of course could not take a vote on that given that there was not a quorum. So what we did do as a staff is send that TAC approved spreadsheet that has not been approved by the policy committee yet to VDOT for smart scale purposes. So we have sent that over at their request. So those are the only 2 updates I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Alex, this is Eric. I got a question.
Certainly.
Why did we send over the TAC approved CMAQ RSDP? It seems like that muddies the waters if we don't have an approval from policy.
I'm happy to answer that, Eric. We had sent an email to VDOT before the policy committee meeting as a contingency in case there was not a quorum to ask what we should do with the 6-year layout for smart scale purposes, given that we were just trying to move the timing of funding around. And so what they said to do via email was to go ahead and send over what the TAC has approved and just mention in writing from the staff that we intend to have that approved by the policy committee once that's possible. So that's still our intention, and that will be on the agenda for next Monday.
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing further, I'll move on to item number 6, public comment. I've already received word from Stacy that we had no written comments. Is there any members from the public online who'd like to make any comments? All right, hearing none, we'll go close the public comment and move on to item number 7A. Adam, if you could introduce us to our new FAMPO administrator.
Sure, I would be more than happy to. So we are very excited to announce that we do have a new FAMPO administrator and director of transportation planning, Mr. Ian Ollis. Ian started last week and will be getting the lay of the land over the next month or 2 and getting to meet many of you. And I'll turn it over to Ian to say a couple words.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks to the chair for the introduction and the welcome. I'm looking forward to getting to meet all of you and getting to know all of you. Under the current COVID circumstances, obviously that's going to be unusually difficult, but we will press ahead. I'm really excited to join the team at FAMPO and the George Washington Regional Commission. And yeah, I'm passionate about transportation, all things transportation and transportation planning in particular. And I'm going to be reaching out to each person, if I haven't already done so, to just connect with you via email, and then we'll try and set up a meeting to see as many in the region as I possibly can. I'm not going to comment on the content of this meeting or the various policy documents and plans that are in process. I'll do that as they come up. But thanks for the warm welcome. Nice to meet you all, and I look forward to working with you all. Please reach out if you have any issues you want to discuss with me. My email, I think, is readily available, Ollis at the usual email address, and it's quite easy to get a hold of me. Thanks a lot, and thanks for the welcome.
All right, thanks, Ian. Welcome aboard. I'm sure we're all happy to have you on board, and I'm sure especially Adam is welcome to have an administrator take some of the load off his plate. All right, well, having said that, we'll go ahead and move on to item 7B, which is the Regional Multimodal Mobility Platform. Ms. McKellen and Ms. Gibson?
Yes, hi, good morning. My name is Amy McGowan. Thanks for putting that slide up. I'm from VDOT, the Office of Strategic Innovation. So I'll give you a little background about myself and why we're here today. So prior to joining VDOT, I worked for Arlington County for 5 years, a locality. My focus was on transportation planning and multimodal strategies, very similar to what you guys are doing. So the last 22 years with VDOT have been focusing on using technologies to improve transportation operations. Did I just kind of leak my age? So with me today is Candace Gibson, and she will introduce herself later. First of all, thank you for the opportunity for us to present to you a regional program that we've been working on for the last few years, and the great news that I'm about to share with you for expanding a couple of those elements to the Fredericksburg area. So next slide, please. So I want to give you a little bit of background how it's all began. So over the few years, US DOT has been championing something called Integrated Corridor Management, ICM, and investing in a few states for piloting technologies, not Virginia though, that could improve the efficient movement of people and goods through institutional collaboration and proactive integrations of existing infrastructure across the mode and technologies, and proactively along all the major corridors. So that's why it's called ICM corridor, integrating them. So VDOT has led the ICM plan development, even without federal grant, for the 95 corridor that covers both Northern Virginia and Fredericksburg. And then VDOT received a federal grant, so we were able to develop a plan for the east-west corridor for Northern Virginia. So upon completion of those planning studies, we don't want to just put on the shelf, right? So we apply for funding for the implementation. And with FAMPO's actually a very strong support and other stakeholder support, effort went into applying for a 2016 Federal Highways grant to advance our program. Unfortunately, we didn't get the good news. So during that time, the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, MVTA, recognized the value of ICM and submitted a Virginia Smart Scale application to implement a large portion of the ICM plan and name it a Regional Multimodal Mobility Program, RM3P. With the Secretary of Transportation Office of Leadership and CTB support, funds were allocated for once to advance MVTA's application outside the smart scale with the Innovative Transportation Technology Funds, ITTF. It's a state money. So, however, the ITTF funded project scope did not include Fredericksburg area. And therefore, we tried it again with the support of FAMPO. We applied for the grant to expand two very important operational related elements of the RM3P program to Fredericksburg. And I'm glad to share the good news with you today that VDOT was awarded the grant this year. And that's why we're here today to present to you what the program is all about. Next slide, please. So what are we trying to accomplish? To sum it up, what we're trying to do is to leverage the collaborative use of real-time data, multimodal infrastructure, and technologies to give agencies the tools to improve travel safety, reliability, and mobility that we're all trying to do. And also give the general public the tools as well to make so that they can make more informed travel choices. Those are all big words. So the next slide, please. I'll give you a little bit more of a kind of in-depth, a little bit more discussion, overview, what this program is all about. So this R3P program represents a partnership between VDOT, Office Secretary of Transportation, MBTA, and DRPT. And we're expanding this partnership with you, the FAMPO. It is a collaborative initiative. So we have 3 primary goals. One is to optimize transportation system performance. So instead of keep building the new roads or some infrastructure, we want to optimize what we have. We want to enhance our travel time reliability for our commuters. So if they expect to get to their destination and typically in congested condition for an hour and a half, for example, very sad, but that should be very consistent, right? Or improved instead of a more, which could cause by the incident. And we wanted to support on-demand multimodal trip choices through the development and deployment of technologies across all modes. So I'll walk you through a few of those technologies. Actually, there are 5 involved, and I'll explain to you which of those actually are going to be made available for Fredericksburg area. So the foundation of our program is all about data. So the data exchange platform is the foundation of the whole thing. Will store and share mobility-related data that provides a one-stop shopping for agencies, private sector, app developer, so that they're empowered to turn data into information. Although the federal grant did not fund the expansion of this platform, but this is such a foundation for anything we do, and therefore it will be expanded to Fredericksburg even with our current funding. The second element is called artificial intelligence AI-based decision support system. So this is one that will be expanded to Fredericksburg area through the federal grant. So this system will help predict the impact of disruption to our transportation network and provide coordinated response options to agencies. So currently, agencies respond to incidents that occur under respective transportation systems and collaborate with other agencies on an ad hoc basis. And sometimes in Northern Virginia, they coordinated through the program called, it's pretty mouthful, Metropolitan Area Transportation Operation Coordination, META program. But in Fredericksburg area, that I don't think that META expands to that far down in Fredericksburg. But through the decision support system, the system would respond, the coordinated response options to agencies. So through agencies' collective response, we were hoping to improve the performance of the entire transportation network. So the coordination will be not the ad hoc based, but it will be part of our process, part of the platform, part of what we do, our standard operating procedure. So we not only just improve the performance of roadway network, but also transit the whole thing. So we were hoping to clear the incident, reopen the transportation network for our travelers more quickly. And also agencies will be provided with predicted information so that they'll be able to respond proactively to incident instead of responding to what's already occurred. The next element at the bottom left is called Commuter Parking Information System. So this is also funded by the federal grant for expanding to Fredericksburg area. So with parking availability information about commuter parking lots, commuters would know where they can expect to find parking, where they can transfer to public transportation and ride sharing. So currently, commuters would need some basic knowledge about where they are and what services are available at those lots in order to plan the trips involving parking and taking bus, train, van pool, or carpool. The only way in our region, actually mainly in Northern Virginia and DC area, or some in Fredericksburg, there are some parking lots that we do provide real-time information to the commuters. But today, how commuters find that information is through visiting the owner's websites, for example, WMATA in the DC region, or for example, mobile apps such as the VRE, or on the signs at the lot entrance. For example, Haymarket commuter lot in Northern Virginia. So with RM3P, all the parking data, static information about the lots, the real-time availability, the prediction, and the usage, the historical trends will have a standard format for sharing with agencies and private vendors. So back in the summer, we heard from many private vendors that the major gap for suggesting trip options involving parking and ride sharing or bus, which the transit is the gap is the information about commuter parking. So we're going to make that a more, consumable ready for those system of private sector. So therefore our commuters will be able to search all relevant parking information and make informed trip plans from the navigation or trip planning tools of their choices. So example about decision support and parking, how they work together is that if there's some incident that detected or predicted on, say, a roadway, Interstate 95, the commuters are heading to that trouble areas will be alerted and suggested to exit the highway and to a nearby commuter parking and switch the mode, which is not that easy to be accomplished without some kind of level of incentive. So on the bottom right, there's a dynamic incentivization. So unfortunately, this element is not part of the grant for expansion, but the concept is that we'll encourage them to make that change, the travel choice change, based on this up-to-minute information. So in return, we'll offer some reward and they're valuable to them. And through those actions, they're becoming part of the solutions. And then I'll back up a little bit on the upper right is another element which is not part of the expansion either, called multimodal analytical planner and map. It is an analytical planning and collaboration tools allowing transportation service providers, transit planners to better plan the resource to serve our commuters' needs. So that gives you a general kind of overview of all the elements. And overall, we want a sustainable program with a minimum impact on agencies' operation and maintenance resource. And we desire partnership whenever possible with you and the private sector. So we're not interested in competing with the private sector, but rather partnering with the and leveraging private sector's innovations. So next slide, please. And this next slide is the reason I'm here today. Candace and I are here today talking to you. The geographic area scope for RM3P was primarily Northern Virginia. Okay, I heard some. It was a comment? All right. So based on the commuting travel patterns, there are significant trips originating from Fredericksburg to Nova and through Nova to DC. So when we kicked off this program late last year with the money, ITTF money, we're hoping that we will one day expand RM3P to Fredericksburg area. Well, Federal Highway Grant recently granted our wishes I mentioned earlier through the federal grant. It's called an Advanced Transportation, very mouthful, Advanced Transportation and Congestion Management Technologies Deployment, ATCMTD grant. So with this grant from FHWA, we're able to expand, as I mentioned, AI-based decision support system and deploy predictive parking availability information using AI along 95 corridor for the parking in both Northern Virginia and Fredericksburg. So the timing is perfect. So we readily added this expanded scope to the RM3P. So next slide, please. So you can't expect, you're not going to think that just Candace and I were able to manage such a large program, right? So with such a large program, we have established a team and put in a governance structure and engaged more than 60 subject matter experts in addition to consultants to shape up the program as we present to you today. And I'm speaking to you today as the program RM3P program manager. So now I'd like to ask Candace Gibson, who's our Deputy Program Manager, to give you an overview of our team. So Candace?
Thank you, Amy, and good morning, everyone. I'm Candace Gibson. I also work for Office of Strategic Innovation. Prior to that, I was the Northern Region, which covers Stafford and Spotsylvania County, TOC manager. So we had a couple of our operators were at the Stafford County Public Safety Building as well. So good morning. So just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a overview about the team. It's a tiered organizational structure that we have with RM3P. As you see on the top tier, we have our program principal from Secretary of Transportation's office, who provides the program oversight, vision, and overarching leadership. Also included in that top tier is our executive committee, which is comprised of our executive level representatives from Office of Secretary of Transportation, VDOT, NVTA, FAMPO, Federal Highway, and DRPT. And the executive committee's role is to govern the overall program, provide strategic guidance, and make key decisions along the way as the program progresses. So if you look at that second tier, it includes the RM3P management structure, which program managers, Amy and myself, I'm the deputy program manager from VITA, as well as our consultant team. Together, we keep everything on scope, on time, and of course, within available resources. The program management support group includes members from our partner agencies as well as our consultant team. And, they're responsible for all of our day-to-day program management, coordination, and administration. So if you look at our third tier in the green, it includes a lot of our important technical stakeholder groups, and there are several, so I won't get into too much detail, but just to give you an example, for instance, the stakeholder advisory group is comprised of management level representatives from public stakeholder agencies. And this group is a forum for information exchange about the program, as well as soliciting public agency insights and guidance. And actually, we just recently, October 27th through the 29th, we held 4 focus group meetings, which culminated by our stakeholder advisory group summit. And I know a few of you all here actually this morning, I think, participated in those events. And it was a really great event. Participants were very supportive and expressed interest, and we utilized a lot of different innovative approaches to have that engagement. We had some animated illustrations of the different technologies that Amy had mentioned, as well as a talk show style panel discussion. We tried to have a feel as if, even though we weren't in person, but we had that virtual whiteboard and sticky notes, just to have that collaborative discussion and feedback. So it was great events. But if you look in the gray area on this chart there's 5 of those program element guidance teams when Amy was mentioning about the different program elements. So these guidance teams, they serve as the core technical group that really guided the technical as well as the institutional deliberations in each of these 5 areas. And the teams, they oversaw the investigative and solutioning activities for their respective program element. And then the delivery teams themselves will be responsible for developing and deploying the needed products and services. So if we go to the next slide. All right, so this is the, as I mentioned, the executive committee. They oversee that strategic direction and investment. And Kathy McGee, the Director of Research and Innovation, is the chair, and Monica Bachman, the executive director from MBTA, is the vice chair of the committee. So as you see, and I know, congratulations, Ian. I know he's the new Director of Transportation planning for FAMPO, so congrats again. And I know Linda and Ian and Adam, they'll figure out who's going to play which role. I know Adam has been on our program management support group and Linda on the executive committee. So we'll get squared away of who's going to do what role and update accordingly. So if we move to the next slide, just kind of go over some anticipated benefits. I know Amy, as she discussed some things, she kind of touched on some of that, but just to go through, the coordinated response to travel disruptions. RM3P will help, local, regional, state agencies work together quicker and more effectively to resolve disruptions and that slow our travelers down by using the decision support technology and improved coordination. When you look at improved safety, to better orchestrate that multi-agency response to our safety-related incidents. When we remove our hazards, the quicker we do that, when we have that quick clearance, we reduce those number of crashes, specifically even those secondary incidents. So really to improve that safety. Collaborative planning, we're looking to provide transportation planners across the region access to better data and new analysis tools, really to facilitate that collaborative planning for their short-term operations as well as their long-term planning to meet travelers' needs. And more reliable commute. We want to provide our transportation network operators and our private partners with that real-time predictive information about travel conditions, whether that's delay on roads or transit or parking availability. And that information will be, shared with the customers in return and help them make more informed choices about how and when they travel. Enhanced connections. Travelers in our region, there's different transportation service needs, when events impact our region, whether it's a snowstorm or Metro rail track maintenance, whatever the case may be. So the increased availability of that travel data will enable the public and private transportation service providers, whether it's, local bus, rail, bike share, ride sharing, to collectively address the changes in the traveler's needs. And then as Amy kind of mentioned too, the most public facing of it, the incentives for individual travelers. RM3P will offer those travelers incentives that, vary based on whatever those current conditions are, but to encourage, use of whether it's a different route or mode or whatever the case may be to maximize the efficiency of the transportation network by really allowing the traveler to be a part of the solution and by making their choice, to reduce the congestion for all and allow everyone to get around more quickly and safely in our region. So if we go to the next slide, give you guys a little bit of background on kind of the timeline. So we officially had gotten kicked off back in October 2019, and our 3-year base period runs through the fall of 2022. If you look at the bottom of our timeline, the baseline scoping, the what of the overall strategy was, led by our program element guidance teams, and with the prioritization direction from executive committee, the framing stage or the how it'll all be accomplished included identifying needs and requirements, which was completed end of the summer, and then the documentation in the form of statements of work and other necessary technical documents, and the executive committee approved recommendations for service delivery, contract vehicles. We're in the final stages of that completion. But if you look at the chart on where it says for today, the solution team selection process is underway. And following that team selection, the program will move forward with development, integration, testing, delivery of the program elements to the end of the base period. Just to let you guys know, this program is taking that agile development approach. And so, requirements and solutions will evolve through an iterative, collaborative process. And the program also emphasizes implementation support and oversight on the execution of the service delivery. If you look at the top of the timeline, the evaluation of the individual program elements as well as the assessment of the overall program will continue throughout the entire timeline and at the closure of the program as well. And the communications and engagement with stakeholder community will continue throughout the entire process. And while this graphic identifies a few of the RM3P high-level milestones, there are dozens of deliverables and milestones along the way to keep everything that I've kind of briefly highlighted on schedule and on budget. So if we go to the next slide, just wanted to thank you all for taking the time. I know this was a little bit of time, but it's really hard to sum everything up for this program in such a short time, but feel free at any time if you guys have any questions or input or anything to reach out to either myself or Amy. Email address is there, rm3p@vdot.virginia.gov. As well as I'd welcome you guys to visit our website as well, rm3p virginia.org. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over.
All right, well, thank you very much, Amy and Candace, for the presentation. Are there any questions for right now?
Hey, Alex, this is Paul from Spotsylvania. I actually did have a couple questions. If you go back to the slide showing the RM3P boundary, I was wondering how much of Spotsylvania is actually included in the program with the expansion.
So, so Paul, hey Paul, good to hear from you. So remember we had our regional ICM study for I-95 corridor all the way to, I think, Route 17, Route 3. So it covers mainly the 95 corridors in Fredericksburg through Spotsylvania and Stafford all the way through Route 3, Route 17 area. But this is not like a hard cut in terms of boundary expansion. So it depending on the incident. So through our decision support system development, we're going to identify some of the hotspots along the corridors. So through the hotspot identification, and depending on the timing of that development, traffic pattern could be a little bit different than before. So we'll finalize in terms of the exact geographic coverage area throughout that corridor to cover in terms of the boundary where it ends. So as Candace mentioned, everything agile. So even our managers approach is agile. So we're very adaptive. As long as it's within the budget and the scope, the resource, we'll be able to do the right thing. So
hey, Amy, thank you. Thank you very much. We're very excited that kind of the grant has allowed the expansion, and the work that FAMPO did in 2019 kind of paid off with the regional effort for this. I'll say just from a Spotsylvania perspective, basically it looks like the current map maybe goes down to the exit 126 area. I'll say if there is an opportunity to expand that down to exit 118, which is Thornburg, I'll say that the county has a lot of economic development in that area, and basically that area is kind of starting to grow. It's becoming kind of the new exit 126, kind of the southern fringe of the Washington kind of urbanized area, kind of in Virginia. That would be something good that would be good to consider.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned earlier, our scope is actually evolving. So through the agile development process, so for our procurement, what would involve much larger areas to give that flexibility for contractor to work with us. But actual development, the response plan, and what areas that actually make sense along the 95 corridors for that expansion, that those details will be worked out. But the mainly is along 95 corridor. That's what the grant was offer us to expand to Fredericksburg.
Sounds great.
Alex, this is Eric. I got a couple of questions.
Sure.
The impression is that this is maybe two things. You've got a first mile, last mile component, it seems like, and then there's also this incident management component along the interstate. Am I understanding that correctly, or is one more important than the other?
I think it's a combination. So Adam, thanks for sharing this whole overview of the program. They all have to come together. So for the AI-based decision support system is very focusing, concentrating on incident response across agencies, across modes. So that's what the decision support system focus is. The parking is helping us to connecting modes. So we're connecting people from driving to the ride sharing or transit. So we have the incentivization and the planning tools. The planning tools actually will help identify all different connections, the first mile, last mile, and what the services are necessary to bring those the complete trip together from a planning perspective. So the whole thing actually work together as a comprehensive program. But for the Fredericksburg expansion I mentioned earlier, is the decision support and parking, and with the data. So with the data, everyone here will be able to have access to the data. So the data will help actually to support all your planning activities. In the contracting language, we'll put in the flexibility for future expansion. So with additional resources, we don't have to go out there for bid again, and we could exercise as an option for expansion for other programs such as the dynamic incentivization as example, to kind of put this whole program as one core together. So to answer your question, it's not one more important than the other. They all come hand in hand. But in terms of for Fredericksburg expansion, decision support system very much focused on incident response, and parking is the connecting the modes.
That leads to my next question. This is very heavily data driven. but the infrastructure isn't in place to provide that data, certainly as it relates to parking. So and I don't know where you have that kind of information, but what is the plan to provide that infrastructure?
So in terms of the parking information, we are looking at innovative technologies not to deploy sensors everywhere. That's a very infrastructure heavy deployment that has a significant impact on our operation and maintenance, especially maintenance resource-wise. So we're looking at actually the parking information system. We're looking at some innovative approach. So the first, we're kind of taking a phased approach. We're going to go out and look for the infrastructure free, more crowdsourced based type of technologies out there, just like for the last 30, 50 years, we detect the incidents on the roadway, we count the speed on the roadway with sensors, right? Then those are very infrastructure heavy and the accuracy issues with all that. But now recently, what do? We use Waze. So well, it's not here to advertise one vendor over the other, but there are options out there like crowdsource approach. So we're gonna explore that opportunity because we talked to private vendors back in the summer. And there is some potential. We want to realize that potential to see if those potential is actually a prime time. If it's a prime time, our resources will be plenty to, I won't want to say plenty, but will be sufficient to expand the data collection without installing infrastructure. But if it's not ready for prime time, our goal is to do an infrastructure light approach that was the resource that we have from the grant and the ITTF money. And also there's another project funded by ITTF to collect the real-time data for Fredericksburg area commuter parking lots could all come together so that we can implement infrastructure, putting the infrastructure enough to cover a majority of those commuter parking lots. Then we'll prioritize those lots, which ones will collect additional real-time money data. The prediction will help us not having to install sensor everywhere. And that's the purpose of having the prediction. So the prediction functionality will help us to gather that type of data for more lots than we could actually afford by installing sensors at every parking spot in our area.
So this is Eric again. How are we going to be kept in the loop as this develops? Because your schedule is very aggressive without clear evidence of how you're going to do it. So I think it would be useful for us to be kept in the loop as you move ahead.
Well, obviously, we'd love to keep everybody, all the stakeholders in the loop. We have actually gone into this RM3P program for over a year now, and we've been releasing the newsletter, electronic newsletters, and we've been just recently engaging Adam into our management team. So we'll leverage this platform as well to share information with you. With a very short amount of time, we didn't get into the detail, but we already actually have a very detailed scope, needs, feature, requirement documentation, and we also have developed our procurement strategy, how to break up the program into different pockets of the project, the phase, and what pilot we're going to conduct. So there's quite a bit of detail going into it. So we will keep you guys included. If you would share with Adam, which of you, or maybe Adam share with us the membership of this group, we can put you on those distribution lists. And then through more direct working with Adam, we'll share more information when the time is right to engage you guys as well.
Thank you.
This is Jason. I just had a quick question. Well, I was just curious, you may or may not be aware, but Stafford was about a year ago chosen to be the test bed for the Smart City Initiative with the Center for Innovative Technology. I know one of the things that they've been discussing a lot is traffic sensors, parking, smart parking, all of that kind of stuff. And I'm just wondering, I guess more than anything, just wanted to make you aware of that. There may be some opportunities specific in Stafford, around some of our parking facilities and so forth, where there might be some partnerships available with the Smart Cities Initiative. So just to make you aware of that, And certainly if we come up with anything on our end, we'll try to reach out to you all and see if there's an opportunity to partner.
Sure. We actually, through the summer, we had hosted the request for information in the private sector team. We're involved and has shared with us that initiative, and also a Center for Innovation, CIT Technology. I think they were part of that effort initiative. Also had some discussion and exchange information with us as well. So we have gathered quite a bit of information scanning, if you will, what's out there. But yeah, we look forward to all the partnership possible. As I mentioned earlier, there was another, I don't know if I make it clear, there was another ITTF investment in another project in Fredericksburg for collecting real-time parking availability data, which is outside our R3P that we're going to be partnered with. Actually, that investment is a matching fund that we consider a matching fund to the federal grant. So we're working with that, so that federal grant could be expected, we can leverage that seed money to do more. But thank you for bringing that up. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, well, if there's no further questions for Amy and Candace, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation today, and look forward to getting some more information about this.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda, we'll move on to item 7C, which is the I-95-395 Commuter Choice Program update. Mr. Owen, if you could take us through that.
Great, thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to join you this morning to provide an overview of commuter choice on the I-395-95 corridor. This is actually very timely because we have a call for projects opening today for fiscal years 22 and 23 funding. So our eligible applicants will be hearing from me a bit later today, not for the first time in this process, with the link to the application materials. We've also done kind of an introductory webinar with everyone that today's presentation will recap, and we have further engagement coming up over the next couple of weeks in terms of one-on-one workshops with eligible applicants as well. So next slide, please. So what is Commuter Choice? This is our program at NBTC that reinvests a portion of toll revenues from the 95 and 395 express lanes into multimodal transportation improvements that benefit toll payers in the corridor and support overarching improvement goals for the corridor of maximizing person throughput and implementing multimodal improvements that basically are going to be attractive to commuters, contribute to improved traffic conditions in the corridor. Our funding is awarded competitively based in large part on how well projects meet these goals, and I'll go over shortly what our evaluation process looks like. The funding for the program comes from Transurban, the concessionaire for the 95 and 395 express lanes, as part of their master agreement with the Commonwealth for the roughly 70 years that they have the concession. There is an annual transit investment payment that's stipulated in there. One thing I'll mention is that they do have a bit of flexibility in that schedule in cases where revenue falls short of projections, but we have been talking with them at a staff level, and they've indicated that they plan to make their full payment this fall, which should be coming in very soon on the anniversary of the date that the 395 express lanes opened. So we anticipate full funding of about $30 million for this 2-year program, which is great news given that COVID-19's repercussions have affected revenue and pretty much everything around the region right now. We do administer a similar program along I-66 inside the Beltway that's been in place since 2017. And in terms of the transportation projects, we can support a pretty wide range of multimodal improvements, including new and enhanced bus services, access to transit improvements, transportation demand management, carpool and vanpool strategies, bus and rail capital, and corridor roadway improvements. A key point for anything we support is that it must confer a benefit to the people paying the tolls in the corridor. So the clearest indication of that is ability to move more people through the corridor in the peak period, peak direction. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about the I-395-95 corridor, we mean from Spotsylvania County all the way up to the DC line. So our eligible applicants are NVTC and PRTC member jurisdictions, as well as transit agencies serving the area. In terms of how the program is run, NVTC and PRTC actually have joint approval responsibilities over the program. That's per the memorandum of agreement with the Commonwealth that governs the program. However, per a subsequent memorandum of agreement between our two commissions, we at NVTC run the program on a day-to-day basis. This gives PRTC for their OmniRide services more latitude to be a funding applicant and recipient. Next slide, please. In terms of how we evaluate projects under the program, and I should mention, I kind of went through eligibility at a very high level. There are a number of other kind of stipulations and limitations that apply to certain types of projects. So as we have further discussions with eligible applicants over the next couple of weeks, we will go through, things they should know in more detail about that. But in terms of, how projects are scored, and kind of how they're prioritized, the technical evaluation process is a big piece of that. The commissions have the latitude to prioritize projects as they see fit, but this process has historically played a pretty significant role in the decision making. And actually, hot off the presses, since I sent these slides to Adam last week, the commissions have now approved this technical evaluation process as part of opening the round 2 call for projects in this corridor. So basically, 70 of the 100 points relate to those corridor improvement goals, how efficiently a proposed project would move more people through the corridor, and also the attractiveness and viability of transportation alternatives that would be created. So is it saving commuters' travel time over a non-tolled driving trip? Is it connecting modes of transportation more effectively? Is it improving connections between activity centers in terms of both MWCOG and FAMPO activity centers? And is it helping to absorb trips that could theoretically be kind of priced off of the expressway as a result of tolling or the HOV restrictions? Besides those factors, we also look at cost effectiveness in terms of basically technical merit bang for the commuter choice buck, taking into account also the useful life of the project that we're funding. There's an applicant preference criterion that allows each applicant to identify their top priority out of the projects they're submitting and receive 10 points for that. And then 5 points for basically, have you talked with other agencies that may have reason to care about your project? And if so, can you document that? Next slide, please. So just kind of for sake of reference, shown here is the slate of funded projects from our first round of I-395-95 funding. This took effect about a year ago as the 395 express lanes opened. Overall, there were 10 projects, of which 8 were new or enhanced bus services, and 2 were transportation demand management efforts. One thing I'll note is that the biggest difference in the evaluation process from round 1 is that in round 1, there was an emphasis on projects that could be operational by the first day of tolling in the 395 express lanes, which obviously has now happened, so that's no longer part of the evaluation process. But in general, in the 395-95 corridor, as well as in the I-66 corridor, our process has been friendly to bus service improvements. And we do have a pretty rigorous performance reporting requirement for the program. So we've started collecting data on projects we've supported to report to the Commonwealth each year. And some of the improvements that we funded in the corridor prior to COVID were really doing quite well, even in the first few months of operations, including OmniRides to Stafford County routes. These were long-haul express routes starting from an area that didn't have express bus service, but already had something of a market in place in terms of robust casual carpooling to the Pentagon and to downtown DC. And these bus services are able to take advantage of the full length of the express lanes, basically. And also 2 local service enhancements to Dash routes in the city of Alexandria. These were all-day, everyday service improvements on 2 routes that feed into the corridor and serve significant transit-dependent concentrations. So those were doing quite well in terms of initial ridership gain, too. Next slide, please. In terms of kind of other changes between the last round of funding and this new call for projects, I mentioned the technical evaluation process, and the process that I just showed is the process we'll be using for this round. A few other policy changes that we're making and that the commissions have now adopted really kind of relate to making sure that we're providing good stewardship of the funding and encouraging and supporting efforts that will provide robust benefits to toll payers. So one of these is a framework for larger capital projects, basically trying to encourage infrastructure projects under commuter choice, since these may benefit corridor commuters for multiple decades in some cases. But these are a bit riskier, and one of the key kind of constraints on our funding is that projects need to have their funding obligated within 2 years and expended within 5 years. So there's an emphasis on relatively quick deliverability under the program. We've also put in place a minimum funding award amount, and this is basically to make our awards commensurate with the reporting and invoicing responsibilities that our recipients have. We've put in new requirements for transportation demand management projects. These tend to be longer term incremental efforts to make commuters more aware of their travel options and incentivize those. We really want to make sure that we're ensuring measurable efforts where we can directly see what the outcomes of our funding are. And then finally, a requirement for partner support documentation in cases where a third party would be significantly involved in implementing the project, basically to make sure that that implementation is going to proceed smoothly if the project is funded. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that the round 2 application period opens today, and I'll show some specific immediate next steps in a moment. But overall, our time frame is based around getting to a set of funded projects in June, when the Commonwealth Transportation Board adopts their 6-year improvement program. So our application period closes January 29th. We'll be doing eligibility review and technical evaluation in the spring, such that by the end of March, we will hopefully have a set of scored projects. We also will have a public comment period in the spring that will likely be very much virtual or entirely virtual. Next slide, please. So in terms of specific next steps, later today I will be sending out the application link and information to all of our eligible applicants. This week and next week, we'll be having one-on-one virtual workshops with interested eligible applicants to discuss project ideas and to go over the application materials in more detail. So we have, I believe, scheduled events with OmniRide, Fred Transit, and Spotsylvania County at this point. Throughout the application period, my team will be available for questions and discussion, to talk through additional project ideas or go through any questions about the application materials. And then, as I mentioned, on Friday, January 29th, applications are due at the end of the day. Next slide, please. So that is my overview, and I'm happy to take any questions you have.
All right, thank you very much, Ben. Are there any questions?
This is Jason. I would just say thanks for your presentation. Also, Alex, I don't know if you've reached out yet already, but I think it'd be great if we could get a meeting set up with you to go over some potentials for applications in Stafford.
Okay.
All right, if there's no other questions, Ben, thank you very much for the presentation, and look forward to starting the application period here.
Great, thank you very much. Good to be with you today.
Oh, I had myself muted. Sorry about that. Item 7D, the VTrans upgrade. Mr. Weishman.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Great. So Adam's let me know that I have the ability to share my screen, so I'm going to attempt to do that now. And if it all goes as planned, then we can get started. So let me know when you see the screen.
Yep, it's on.
Okay, great. All right. All right. So as I mentioned, thanks for having me here today. I was with this group back in September and provided sort of an update at that time of where we stood with the prioritization of the VTrans midterm needs. So today is really an update and sort of making a plug for the opportunity that exists now to provide comments on the prioritization and the policy for prioritization. So I do have some material to get through in the slides today. Let me see how I advance. Okay. But I want to go through, as fast as I can without sort of skipping over anything, because what I really want to spend a little bit of time on is describing some of the tools that we put in place for accepting comments and for hosting sort of virtual workshops around this policy and some of the results of the prioritization. So I will work through some of the process and the context slides, but really gearing the presentation today toward the opportunity to comment on this policy and the results. So in terms of context and overview, so VTrans is Virginia's statewide transportation plan, and it's done on a routine basis and is updated every 4 years. And we've been working on this iteration of the VTrans update since late 2018. There are really 4 pillars to this exercise as we've laid it out. So the first pillar was to work with the Commonwealth Transportation Board to set vision, goals, and objectives. And then late last year, the board adopted a set of VTrans midterm needs, which I'll describe a little bit in some of the coming slides. This year in 2020, we've been working on the prioritization. So we're really in this sort of second pillar as things stand today. In the next year or so, we'll be going into the long-term needs identification and then into recommendations. So this is sort of a high-level overview of our planning process and where we're at as we speak today. So why do we do VTrans? So VTrans is an effort that meets several state and federal requirements for statewide transportation planning. So some of you all may be familiar with the connection between VTrans as the state's transportation plan and SmartScale, the state's sort of programming prioritization process. So one of the core deliverables of VTrans is the needs assessment, which then is used as a screening criteria for SmartScale projects. So that's probably the context that you all are maybe most familiar with VTrans. There are also some other connections between VTrans and the revenue sharing program, and then other federal requirements that the state plan attempts to meet. And one thing that we like to sort of emphasize is that VTrans per the state code is meant to be sort of a fresh look at the state's needs and potential solutions. It's not meant to be sort of an aggregation exercise. So this is really an independent statewide evaluation. And when it comes to the midterm needs, what we're really doing is a problem identification for the state. So we do this problem identification over 2 time periods. So I mentioned before that we have the midterm needs, which have been accepted by the CTB at, for SmartScale Round 4's use. So the midterm needs cover sort of the near-term time horizon just outside the 6-year improvement program. And one of the key purposes, again, is for screening of SmartScale projects. When the board took action in January on the midterm needs, they directed our office at that time to develop a policy to prioritize the needs. And I'll get into a little bit in the next couple slides on sort of what the prioritization, how it may impact, I guess, the planning and programming process as we move forward. So then the next effort I mentioned we'll be working on is the long-term needs, which are the things that are a little further out and maybe, more, less hard to grasp with existing data. Based on trends analysis, we can sort of get a view of future policies that may need to be considered. And we'll be undertaking that work in 2021, as I mentioned. So how will the prioritization be used? So the board has had a few opportunities to give some direction on this. There was a presentation at the May CTV workshop by Deputy Secretary Donahue, and then in July as well, a discussion around the potential to use the prioritized VTrans midterm needs as a study pipeline. So the idea would be to have a targeted approach to allocating state dollars for studies, project development, for advanced activities. So if you think about things like a interchange justification report, that's a big study that VDOT may fund. The idea would be that the IJRs that we do around the state are sort of targeted to our highest priority interchanges, as just an example. So this is the concept that's been discussed at the CTB, and from our perspective, our responsibility has been to sort of help them develop the policy, but then also sort of come up with the method to do the prioritization. So I'll talk a little bit about that method here, and then, like I said, my focus is going to be on sort of providing you all with the tools to help us, get some comments on the exercise and the policy prior to going back to the CTB. So in terms of the steps to prioritize, we really have 4 steps, and I have a few slides that go into greater detail on each of the steps. So the first step at its most basic level is deciding sort of on the buckets within which to do prioritization. So as I'll show, we have one exercise that's a statewide prioritization that's focused in on the corridors of statewide significance. And then we have a construction district prioritization. So comparing only segments within the Fredericksburg district to other segments within Fredericksburg district, for example. Step 2 is to go through and look at each individual VTrans need category. So we have needs for congestion, we have needs for, say, bicycle access, transportation demand management. So we have these variety of need categories. And with step 2, what we're doing is going in and sort of bringing in additional data and saying, within Fredericksburg district, what's the highest need for congestion, highest need for bicycle access. So looking at each need category independent of any other need categories. So I'll talk a little bit about our approach to doing that. Step 3 is where we sort of bring everything together. So we have these various need categories, but if you have a segment that has multiple things going on, step 3 is the process to sort of bring those needs together and then apply some weighting and aggregating those results to sort of define, a segment that's just the highest priority across multiple categories. And then step 4 is a slight adjustment that's done at the end based on some feedback we received from the CTB to consider some other factors like bridges in need of repair, pavement in need of repair, some things that aren't embedded in the other steps that the board thought were important to include. So those are the 4 steps at a high level. Step 1, as I mentioned, is establishing sort of the buckets within which we're doing prioritization. So we have a statewide prioritization where we're comparing 95 through the FAMPO area to 81 in the Valley compared to US 58 through Southside Virginia. We're comparing these corridors of statewide significance against one another statewide. The second bucket of analysis is done at the district level. And so this is taking into account the regional network needs, safety needs, the UDA, IEDA needs, and sort of looking at within Fredericksburg district, the segments that would be of highest priority. Step 2 I mentioned is where we sort of dig in each need category. So I guess congestion may be an easy example to use. So for each measure, including congestion, but then all the others as well, we brought in data to represent sort of the severity or the acuteness of the problem. and then the magnitude. So how many people or users of the system are being impacted by the problem. So this is the basis for all the calculations that we did to prioritize within a need category. Is we had some measure of the severity and a measure of the magnitude, and then tried to establish what a very high need, medium need, or low need were within each category. So for step 3, as I mentioned before, and just to reiterate, the idea here was to be able to sort of bring everything together and compare, in this example showing here, the segment on the left side of the screen where you have one need present along a segment, and it's a very high need, in this case for transit access. How do you compare that to a segment that has, multiple needs going on across categories, has a congestion, bike, pedestrian, and safety need, but none of them are, shown to be very high needs. So how do you kind of compare this one segment to the other? So the guidance that we were given is to think of a way that can be sort of, flexible to the local context of a particular facility. So for statewide, we're only applying, one weighting, and it's listed here at the top. So each need category is given a certain weighting towards a statewide prioritization. But within the district prioritization, we actually looked at, where that segment fell as it relates to the smart scale area types. So there was different weighting done depending on, where a segment was. Area type A, I think, is where most of the FAMPO area is, but some other areas of Fredericksburg district that are more rural and in a different context. Obviously, I believe there are some area type Ds within Fredericksburg district. So when we bring everything together, area type D, you'd be weighting more heavily towards like a safety need. Area type A, you'd be weighting more heavily towards a congestion need. So it allows sort of a method to consider differences even within a construction district of the context of the segment. And then the final step, which really we're viewing and how it's sort of played out, it's really just a minor adjustment and a minor tiebreaker as we've seen it play out, but it's to provide an adjustment for influencing factors for a co-located bridge or pavement need or an exposure to vulnerability from sea level rise, storm surge, or inland riverine flooding. So this is the final step, is to adjust the score slightly based on these impacts. All right, so what I want to do now, and then leave some time at the end for questions, is just pop over to, and hopefully this works out, but pop over to our webpage. So maybe if someone can confirm that we're now viewing the web page.
Confirmed.
Okay, great. So our webpage is vtrans.org. We've got a lot of information on here as it relates to some of the upcoming, workshop meetings that we'll have, and I'll talk about those at the end. But if you go to this midterm planning, midterm needs prioritization page, what we've done here is we've put together all the information in sort of a one-page format. You can take a look again at the steps that I walked through. But most importantly, we have posted a document. It's called the Draft Policy Guide, and then its companion, the Draft Technical Guide. So the policy guide is really what the board will be considering taking action on. So that would be something, for folks on the call, if you want to review this and provide some comments, that would be maybe a good starting point, just to understand, what's being done here. The technical guide goes into a lot more detail. So it would be where you would find, what the data sources were, what the years of analysis were, what the calculations, kind of the detail of the calculations and how they were done. So if you're looking to go deeper, this would be the document to take a look at. We also have this interactive mapping functionality, which is a way to sort of visualize the results of the analysis. So I mentioned the first step we had was to look at a statewide perspective and then a district perspective. So we have the ability to sort of show the results of both analysis, as well as sort of look at, and we're sort of zoomed into the FAMPO area now, but the ability to also look at within each need category, the results that I mentioned for step 2, where we're doing sort of very high to low within individual need categories. So what we're hoping with this is it allows, stakeholders, the public, to review the results. You have the ability to click the question mark button here, and it goes into some detail on, how this process was done, what was the severity measure, what was the magnitude measure. So you can kind of review the process or the methodology, but then you can also add in this map a location-specific comment. So if there's a disagreement, or if you have a comment that says, your data may not have been complete here because we would expect this to be very high, or something that's sort of specific to a location, this would allow you to provide some comments to that effect, which may help us, find errors if they were to exist. So that's available, and I wanted to plug that real quick. And then another way, if you have folks on your staff that are, really savvy and want to get into more of the details with a GIS desktop, review, we have the ability here for you to review the data that sort of underlies this interactive map. So that link is provided here as well. So that's the web page that we're using for review. We have some, results that we're showing in sort of summary statistics. One thing to keep in mind here is that, the number of, this is roadway directional miles that fell, at the end of the process into each priority 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the one thing to keep in mind here is that for any given district, the number of miles you have in priority 1 is dictated by the overall number of miles of needs. So, comparing each district to one another may not be that, useful for this graphic, but you can take a look here and see that how we've done this is really made it difficult to become a priority 1 location. It's the top 1% of mileage within a district becomes priority 1. So we've got, like I mentioned, we went through the 4 steps and we have the scores. To become priority 1, you have to be, based on the current draft policy, be a top 1% location through the scoring. So we also have, I mentioned, we have the view for statewide. So this is the results for the statewide prioritization, which is, I guess, this graphic's a little bit more instructive in that, each district or every segment statewide was compared to one another. So you'll see the Fredericksburg district has 31 miles of priority 1 from a statewide perspective. So these graphics are available online as well for review. So I'm just going to finish with a couple noteworthy items and then allow a chance for questions if there are any. So one thing to keep in mind with the V-Trans needs is that this is problem identification, and it's not necessarily attempting to identify what the solution or improvement should be, or for that matter, where it should be. So we get a lot of questions about this because, our needs are tied to the VDOT linear referencing system. So all the needs are on the roadway system. But what we try to emphasize is that doesn't dictate that the policy would have, or the improvement would have to be on, say, I-95. It could be, a TDM strategy or things that we've talked about earlier in this meeting, or, improvements to parallel rail facilities and things like that. So that's one thing to keep in mind here, is that the needs aren't meant to prescribe the type of improvement or, the location necessarily of the improvement. The third point here is that this is the sort of the first go at a data-driven needs prioritization statewide. So we would like this review, your all's review, to help us if there's anything in the processing that is incorrect, to allow us to, accommodate changes, but also to keep in mind that it will ultimately be the policy that's considered by the board. So, the result is an outcome of the policy. So if there is ever a discrepancy between the results that you see on a map, say, and the policy, that would be the policy that takes precedent. And then finally, with noteworthy items, we wanted to make a plug here for a new technical assistance program that will be pushing out soon, and this has to do with the UDAs, planning assistance for UDAs. So there'll be more information on this coming out in the next couple of weeks, so you should receive some emails about a webinar having to do with this technical assistance program. So finally, the timeline, where we are now in the October to November timeline is we've released the policy. I showed you the website with some of the resources there for review. Our comment period is open through November 30th, and we're conducting some workshops now, and I'll show a slide on this next. In December, we plan to go to the board, the CTB, with all the comments that we received, and at that time allow some discussion on the policy and if there are any changes that are needed before we go back to the board in January to request action on the policy. So finally, we're hosting these workshops. We had 2 to date, and those are available as recordings on our website. So there are links here, and I'll send you all the slide deck after the call today. And we have 2 upcoming opportunities. So one will be this Friday at 10 a.m. and next Tuesday at 1:30. So the next 2 sessions will be focused in on Q&A. So if there are things, after you saw the presentation today and you explore some of the resources and still have questions, please do plan to jump on Friday or next Tuesday, and you can have a chance to discuss those things in more detail. I mentioned our comment period is open through November 30th. So as far as points of contact, our team, there's 3 of us on our team, and I'm the primary point of contact for the Fredericksburg district, and my contact information shown on the slide here, my phone number and email. So if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And if you want to submit comments, there are a number of ways to do that. We have a comment@vtrans.org email address, or feel free to send any comments directly to any of the folks listed on this slide as well. So I tried to move through pretty quickly. I'd be happy to answer any questions or go into detail on anything that I kind of breezed through at this time. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Chris, for that presentation and update there. Are there any questions for Chris?
Hey, Chris, this is Michelle from VDOT.
Hi, Michelle.
Hey, I just wanted to make sure that when you talk about this prioritization process, and you talked about the significance of some of this, if this is adopted by the Commonwealth Transportation Board, just so that everyone, on the call understands, some of this would limit how VDOT can use some of its funding that we currently have for assistance to localities and other things, for studies, for assistance with smart scale applications and other things based on this prioritization policy that might go into effect, correct?
Yeah, so that's the premise from which this is coming. It's trying to sort of target the study dollars, but in terms of exactly how that's going to take place, I think the knowns there are a little bit limited. There is a group with high-level leadership within VDOT, DRPT, and then I believe some representatives from certain districts that are reviewing this and sort of developing, how this would actually be implemented. So I don't know the details of that, but if there are some comments to that effect, those would be good to share as well, like guidance on maybe experiences with getting study dollars and how this policy could impact that. Those would be good things for us to share with us so that we can take those to the board when we go in December with the policy for their consideration.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, if there's no other questions for Chris, thank you very much for that update today. And I certainly encourage everyone to go visit the VTrans site and check out the needs, certainly for their specific localities.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. All right, next is item 7E, the 2050 Long Range Plan Update. Mr. Jackson? Adam, I actually don't see Mr. Jackson's name on our list of participants currently, unless he's a caller.
I don't either. Hey, David, do we have you as just a caller by chance right now? All right. Well, in light of timing, Mr. Chair, I might propose that we skip over this. There's nothing pressing on the LRTP right now. We were going to have Cambridge give a quick overview of some of the work that they're going to be doing with the modeling, as well as the timelines for that work. So I will let the packet item speak for itself and try and get Cambridge for our January meeting. So I apologize.
That's okay. Certainly understand. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and move on to 7F, which is the CMAQ and RSTP prioritization methodology update by myself. I had sent out an email, I don't know, several weeks ago, inquiring with the working group about, hey, what steps we should be taking towards next, as we both, honestly, all of us have just a lot of other responsibilities and time constraints, and none of us seem to have the time or the staff and resources to kind of dedicate a full effort to reviewing this. Based on some information Adam provided after he received from speaking to Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization, they're actually undergoing a whole effort themselves to update their LRTP prioritization process, and then kind of use that to feed in the updates for their corresponding CMAQ and RSTP prioritization process. Personally, to me, I think that sounded like a good idea, not putting the cart before the horse and kind of start from the top and work our way down to the bottom there. Having said that, I know, Stafford is looking to have some kind of modification to the RSTP process, so we can kind of include some kind of scoring element that would provide a benefit to the North Stafford TMA area as part of the new MOU FAMPO and TPV is looking to enter into. Adam, I believe you had sent me some information or a PowerPoint presentation about a month ago based on using possibly some streetlight data, where we could use that to kind of show some kind of benefit to the TMA area. Personally, I think that's a good idea. I'd like to send that presentation out to the working group and the rest of the TAC members to kind of review that and see if that's something we'd be able to do, and maybe just do kind of a short-term fix to the RSTP methodology. And then, now we've got a FAMPO administrator on board and all that, kind of looking at doing a whole prioritization process, starting maybe the new year. And just kind of want to get thoughts from the group and see if anybody had any comments or feedback regarding that approach.
Alex, this is Eric. I don't think a short-term fix is going to fly. I think we're going to have to do it right to begin with, and even if we're delayed. But I thought we were going to get some info from the Hampton Roads folks that they're using already, not the fact that they're going to redo it, but the fact that they had figured out a way to evaluate that. And I don't know that we've seen that yet.
All right, so you're looking at maybe reach back out to Hampton Roads and see if they have some more details on their prioritization methodology?
Yeah, I mean, it sounded promising, and it would be useful to get a look at it.
So, Alex, this is Paul. I just had a question. I know that the Hampton Roads methodology is pretty robust. And I know when I think we'd had maybe an initial discussion about this maybe a month or so ago, there was some concern that that could kind of exceed the staff capability of what the FAMPO staff could do without hiring a consultant. Maybe a simpler approach might be better, given the fact that Hampton Roads is allocating hundreds of millions of dollars, and basically FAMPO is not allocating that level of funding. So just with that in mind, I'm wondering if maybe more of an incremental approach could work, that just the concern that Stafford has with North Stafford not receiving maybe what I would say the proper benefits for being part of the TMA for like the regional STPG funding. Maybe that could be something we could do in kind of the near future, but we could kind of work towards a larger, kind of more comprehensive update, which would be maybe on a later time frame. So just to go back to what Eric said, I think we could do both, but we just wouldn't do everything at once.
This is Michelle. I would agree with Eric that this has been a topic that's been kicked around for quite some time that probably does need the attention of the TAC to tackle somewhat. I would also say that I think the existing prioritization process has some ambiguity to it. Not advocating that you need something as complex as these larger MPOs, because I don't think, I agree with Paul that I don't think you need something that complex for the size of FAMPO. But I think during your update, the committee should think about what they could do to maybe look at the existing measures as well and refine those somewhat while they're taking on the TMA area as well.
This is Jason. What was the last direction we had from the committee? Adam, do you know?
Jason, in terms of the overall sort of picture of updating the CMAQ and STPG prioritization, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I think the last that was brought up at the policy committee was probably sometime in the summer, where I think that we had indicated that we would try and get something together by the end of the year. I think Smart Scale kind of took over and has gotten a lot of our attention in the intervening time. So we had basically been given the green light to push forward and establish a subcommittee of the TAC to kind of work on this. But I think to Alex's point that there's been a number of other kind of more important pressing things that have taken shape over the last few months. So there's not anything new that we've received per se since, I would say, probably early summer.
So I guess the committee kind of anticipating something back still by the end of the year at this point?
I think, Jason, that's kind of the issue we're having here, with just a lack of staff time and resources to commit to this monumental effort to go back and redo the whole prioritization process for CMAQ and STBG, and trying to find for all of us to kind of get together and hash this out.
Right.
On some of the emails, the correspondence we've had over emails, I mean, most of us kind of agree, like, based on the scale of this undertaking, this might be best suited for a consultant to undertake.
So but right now, I guess the committee is still anticipating something back. So the question is whether or not to go back and tell them it's too much for us, or adjust your request. Or I guess part of what I'm thinking out loud here is that I know we're talking about overhauling it. Are we making this a bigger issue than it needs to be? I mean, do we just need to go in, take the existing policy, and instead of getting too complex with it, maybe just simplify this down to looking at the STBG matters and some of the other matters of ambiguity, perhaps, that Michelle brought up? and see if there's a way to, kind of focus in on those things.
This is Eric. I tend to agree. I think Michelle makes a good point that perhaps we initially look at our existing policy and maybe make some recommendations for changes, with the understanding that we will explore other changes in a broader context. But I think you're right. We could move ahead with something fairly, well, I hate to use the word quickly, but we could move ahead with something more manageable at this point. Even if we don't hit it by the end of the year, we could certainly do it in the next few months.
Yeah,
I would offer.
Sorry, go ahead, Adam.
Sorry, Jason. Yeah, Alex, I would offer too, just kind of from a timing perspective and thinking about some of the schedule concerns maybe over the next 5 or 6 months, is based on the current sort of development schedule for the LRTP, we're looking at having projects prioritized in March and April. And so if we were to do sort of the approach that Hampton Roads recommended to me a couple months ago and look at doing kind of an overhaul of the LRTP, I just don't think we quite have the time to do that for the 2050 LRTP effort, in addition to sort of the timing constraint around the normal sort of spring cycle of allocations for CMAQ and STBG. So I would almost offer, from maybe our perspective right now, to look at tweaking and modifying sort of both, right? Because we're going to have in around the March timeframe, looking at using both, one for the LRTP that we already have that I think does need a little bit of adjustment, as well as sort of what we've been talking about here with some more streamlined approaches to get rid of some of the ambiguity, that sort of thing for the CMAQ and STBG.
Well, that would suggest we get started and wrap this up in a couple months, at least with an initial effort.
Mm-hmm.
This is Kate. Can I just ask a question? How aligned or similar are the two prioritization processes, the LRTP process and the CMAQ STBG process?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm happy to answer that. They're not just related, but they're intertwined actually. So for one project type in the CMAQ STBG method, it actually uses the FAMPO highway methodology, which is what's used specifically for the LRTP. So they're pretty intertwined, but only for a certain project type. So if there's a roadway capacity improvement, it actually uses the LRTP process. The one deficiency that the LRTP process has right now is it does not have anything, I would suggest, meaningful or robust when it comes to transit or bike ped, which is a major component we would like for the LRTP. So that's what we'd be looking at, sort of updating and modifying from that perspective. But to answer your question, they're quite interrelated.
So the thought would be to add a more robust prioritization for transit and TDM to the LRTP?
That would be our suggestion.
Okay, thanks.
This is Eric again. I think if we commit to hitting the RSDP analysis in the next few months, we ought to be able to have a deliverable by early in the year in time for to stay on schedule with our projects.
All right, well then I guess basically what we're hearing today then is we're go back and take another quick look at doing something we can do to kind of update the CMAQ RSTP prioritization process, kind of clean that up a little bit and insert something there for the Stafford TMA area, and kind of just treat it, I guess, sort of a kind of a Band-Aid until we can kind of do a full overhaul, I suppose.
A Band-Aid sounds so temporary. But yes.
Hey, Alex, this is Paul from Spotsylvania. are you thinking we'll have a meeting basically to discuss this in the near future?
Another meeting, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I was just asking. I know, I mean, the TAC is not meeting in December, so that, basically maybe a subcommittee that's doing this could meet in December. But I guess I was just trying to understand what the process was. If we really want to do something in the next couple months, we're going to have to start to meet.
I agree. I guess let me go ahead and send out the streetlight data presentation that Adam sent me, so to kind of look at that to see if maybe we want to use that kind of additional methodology to kind of include with the scoring for RSTP, STBG projects. And we'll look at maybe setting up a meeting kind of, first or second week in December for the working group to kind of have an online meeting to discuss and hash out some more stuff.
Alex, this is Eric. I wonder if it might make sense for us to have an initial meeting in November to kind of map out what we're going to do, and then have a more substantive meeting in December and into January, et cetera. I think if we met a little bit sooner, we've been talking about this long enough that if we could have almost an organizational meeting in November and then press on from there.
Okay. So I know the policy committee is meeting next Monday. Would you want to do it later on that week, or the following week kind of starts moving into Thanksgiving holiday and all? So.
Sure. That works for me, certainly.
All right. Let me check my calendar real quick.
So this is just an idea. This is Paul. I know there's kind of a small working group kind of for the LRTP, which is already meeting, I think, at Friday at 10 on November the 20th. I don't know if we could kind of do the CMAC RSTP meeting either right before that or right after that, since a lot of the same people kind of that are on that call would also be kind of on the call for the CMAC and the RSTP. I know that CMAC and the RSTP would have some additional people as well, but that's just a thought.
I could certainly do that if need be, certainly.
Yeah, Friday the 20th works for me. So you said the LRTP meeting was at 10?
Yeah, it's at 10 to 10:30.
Okay, you want to, we'll tentatively schedule maybe something for like 11 a.m. on the 20th?
I could do that.
Yeah, that can work.
All right, I'll work with Adam to get that meeting, online meeting set up and send out an invite to the working group members and those who've expressed interest. All right, well, having said that, for our meeting on the 20th, anything else regarding the CMAC STBG update? All right, if not, we'll move on to next item 7G, funding for the US 1 Market Street project in Spotsylvania. Paul, I'll let you discuss that.
Sure, thank you, Alex. This is Paul Niello from Spotsylvania. Just a couple kind of points. So say FAMPO approved fully funding this project, which is number 22 on the current FAMPO CMAC RSTP spreadsheet in September. The project needs an additional 1.12 million in funding. Right now, we're limited in terms of what can be done with the available funding without affecting other projects. However, there is some CMAC funding available from the Quantico Bus project in North Stafford, number 17, and that project has been completed, has some surplus funding. This funding could be used to start to address the deficit on the Route 1 Market Street projects. So on behalf of Spotsylvania, we would request that whatever funding is available from that project be transferred to basically the Route 1 Market Street project to begin to fully fund that project. And we look forward to continuing to work through the FAMPO process to fully fund the project, hopefully by the spring. I'm happy to take any questions.
Mr. Chair, this is Jamie Jackson. I just wanted to clarify the project was discontinued if we're talking about the transit service. So it was not completed, it was discontinued. Just a small thing, Carl, not a big deal, but we are just not moving forward with it.
All right, yeah, this is Alex. I don't have any other questions, but I think that makes good sense. You know, we've been directed by the policy committee to try to find a way to fully fund that project. And like you said, I don't think we can get there until we get this 5307 fund swap completed. But I think if we can apply a little bit of funding for right now, at least to kind of get you there, get you started.
Yeah, that would sound great. And I guess I'm wondering if basically the transfers that would be kind of needed for that could be added on to the other transfers that the TAC basically approved at the meeting on October 21st, and then basically go forward to FAMPO for approval at the next meeting this coming Monday on the 16th.
Seems to make good sense to me. How about from the rest of the TAC? Anyone else have any questions or concerns with that proposal?
No, that makes sense. We should move along, though, and get it on the agenda.
And Paul, this is Adam. We can reach out to VDOT this week and get what that actual amount is for what the transfer will include.
That sounds great. And one other just minor comment on the spreadsheet. I know we had talked about basically at the meeting on the 21st about trying to add the dates for the phases for number 22 Route 1 Market Street, and it looks like on this version the dates for kind of P right away and construction aren't on there. Is that something we could do kind of for the policy committee meeting?
Oh, I'd be happy to do that. I don't have that information. Is that something that you have as far as those 3 dates?
Well, that would be information that VDOT had. I know, like at the last meeting, we talked about VDOT kind of providing that information to FAMPO, not only for this project. I think there were some other ones missing the dates.
Yeah, if you let us know which projects you want, I can go down the list and provide those. I'm trying to see which ones you think are missing here that are in process. So it would be Market Street.
So my thought was just with projects basically that are kind of committed construction projects in smart scale or other committed projects. I mean, I think, for instance, like number 24 in the city, that should probably have some dates. I mean, there may be some other projects that need it as well. I'll say at the bottom of the list, those projects are smart scale for this round. Those would not need dates. So it's not every project on the list, but at least for maybe number 22, number 24.
Okay.
Maybe 26.
Well, yeah. There are some projects that obviously have dates. There are some that are we're waiting on dates because we've passed their original date. So that gets a little harder to put in there, but we can provide something.
Thank you very much.
All right, if there's no more discussion regarding that item, we'll move on to the next item 7H, which is UPC 109467, the US 1 and Telegraph Woodstock Road intersection. Not much really update to provide on this one. We have had another slight estimate increase. Just did a recent update for right-of-way impacts, and it went up another $140,000. So now we're right about $9.8 million. We're still seeking that $525,000 in STBG funds that the policy committee failed to act on last meeting. So hopefully they'll get to it next week. So that's really all I have to update on that. Next will be item 7I, performance-based planning and program update. Adam?
Sure, thank you, Alex. So there's a couple updates here regarding some 2021 deadlines regarding performance-based planning and programming requirements. The first item in the packet, well, actually, I'll start with this email. This is an email from OIP. I think a couple months ago, this is from September, and this lists out the 3 items just sort of in brief, along with the timeline for each of these that need to be approved. The first item in the packet is related to the Public Transit Agency Safety Plan. So basically, this will be added to the FAMPO TIP, and DRPT designates FRED as a Tier 2 agency within the state and provides language for us to use for our TIP. So we intend to add this language to our TIP along with the targets via administrative modification in January. So I will quickly kind of scroll in here to those pieces of information. So we've got highlighted here what the actual targets are for FRED, if anybody's curious about those. Again, this is from DRPT, as well as language that we can use for our TIP. And so the intention is just to simply use this language as is, switch out, where the placeholder information is, and then this table would put those targets in. So that's what we have as far as the PTASK requirement. I did want to stop and see real quick if there's any questions or comments on our plan for the PTASK. Okay, so I will jump down to the highway safety target setting and the bridge condition target setting. So our plan with each of these is to simply adopt the statewide target that is consistent with what FAMPO did late in 2019. The highway safety target is an annual target setting requirement, and the bridge condition, I'm not sure if that's annual. No, that's a 4-year target. So this is once every 4 years. And again, our intention here is to adopt the statewide target for our NPO. And so this would be via a letter from the FAMPO chair. We would put that before the policy committee for action in January. Happy to take any questions or comments on these two as well. All right, that's all I've got, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Adam. Next, we move on to 7J, which is the Transportation Improvement Program update. Jordan?
Hi, thank you. So the first update we have for the equity analysis is that this is, again, a federally required part of the TIP. We are looking at the fair and meaningful involvement of people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income. And the importance of this is to analyze the benefits and burdens of the transportation projects that we have planned. So again, method 1 just calculated the regional average. This is from the Richmond Regional TPO. And then method 2 is from VDOT, and that was just doubling the average to find out what might be considered meaningfully greater. And then the third method is from the Roanoke Valley TPO, which uses the regional average, but then also standard deviation to calculate a equity analysis index. And through feedback from the TAC and CTAC, the most favorable method was for option 3. And the benefits for option 3 is that it's easily comparable from one target population to another. It can evaluate target populations individually, but also in a comprehensive manner when it is calculated into the index. And then after the creation of the index, we will then use the benefits and burdens to further analyze how these projects are impacting our communities. So this is kind of the option that we have picked to move forward with. And if you have any questions on that, I can answer those types of questions. And if there's no questions for that, I can go on to the second part for the TIP, is just about the rollover. So in September, FHWA and FTA approved the FY 21-24 STIP. And so there will be a few rollover amendments in 3 steps, and FAMPO isn't the last step. So we're looking maybe at the end of this year, but mostly early next year for that rollover amendment to come through. That's all the updates I have.
All right, thanks, Jordan. Any questions from the group? All right, well, thanks. Hearing none, we'll move on to our next item, which is 7K, the Regional Study Ideas and Proposals Update. Adam?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll keep this brief. Did want to share from discussing this last month that we had received a few proposals from Spotsylvania County. So just wanted to have those here for the TAC to review and consider, and then also maybe inquire of VDOT a little bit and talk about the timeline for what this might look like. And so, Stephen or Michelle, if I could maybe put you on the spot, and if there's a time by which it might be helpful for, whether it's FAMPO or a locality to submit this request formally to VDOT, if that could be shared.
Adam, this is Stephen. I would say that we'll need that by maybe a March time frame would be good to have. If I recall, the last time we actually looked for STARS applications, they were on a April-May kind of deadline, and I have to submit those myself. So you would put those through my office, and I would create the submittal based on your information. So yeah, we should have this discussion over the next couple months.
Okay.
Hey, Adam, this is Michelle. I have one question about the under number 2, the US 17 I-95 to New Post corridor preservation study. What is envisioned by that item?
I will turn that over to Paul to answer.
Okay.
Hey, Michelle. So these were just ideas that we kind of tossed out at the last meeting. Now, I'll say kind of with that US 17 kind of corridor around where kind of the VRE station is in Spotsylvania and kind of some of the adjacent areas, there's a lot of development planned for that area. So the thought is basically if there may be things that can be done to improve access management from that area really out to New Post now, it would be easier than kind of after the development comes. I'll say that area, has the potential to explode in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay. I only asked that because Route 17, that corridor, is limited access all the way to New Post. So the only access that is available are at the cross streets right now.
Right. And
So I just want to mention that. And it does have a pretty wide right-of-way already, just for the group if they weren't already aware of that. So just putting those facts out there to remind everyone.
So Michelle, one of the thoughts we had too is I know that kind of way back when the idea was that kind of US 17 would be like a freeway type road with interchanges going through there. I mean that's probably something that's not going to happen with the current kind of fiscal realities. The current 2-lane roadway is probably not adequate to handle the traffic and just to maintain safety for a lot of the intersections. So having some improvements, kind of not as much as kind of the freeway that was originally planned. Maybe some innovative intersections. VDOT might have some other ideas for kind of how to best do it, but that was the thought process behind it.
So so innovative intersections at the current locations where intersections exist instead of the signalized intersections.
Yes, if it would make sense. I know one kind of, intersection that looks like it will be bad in the future is kind of Crossroads and Benchmark and US Route 17. That would be one example. But also there are other examples as well. But again, I mean, maybe, you know, this is a little premature, but this was just an idea that we had as a potential corridor preservation type study.
Okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
This is Paul again. I guess I had a question for Vida. Like, realistically, how many new regional studies do you think that the state could fund? And then the question too is, if any studies were funded, could they be completed before the next round of smart scale?
So the answer to the first question is that's unknown because it's competitive. We've already got a few studies in the pipeline that'll be completed before next round of smart scale. So we could probably get a couple of these, I would hope. But again, I will look into that now that I have your list. Obviously, to have the study done, it would have to begin somewhere in the order of a year before the next year's deadlines for any of these types of projects, as long as they don't become too extensive. The Route 1 from Route 3 all the way down to 4 Mile Fork stars could take quite a bit of time. I think some of these other ones, like the one you were just talking about with Michelle, if we're specifically looking at just the intersections and some sort of, innovative intersection type of selection, median U-turns, those types of things that could be applied. The big question, of course, on 17 is, are we looking at a future 4-lane, 2-lane, so we might be looking at multiple scenarios there as well. But you could make a very specific target, and we could probably move through those and get those done. But again, I will look into what's available.
Thank you.
This is Eric. I have a quick question. Michelle mentioned that VDOT already holds a fair amount of right-of-way on the Route 17 corridor. How much and how extensive is that, just out of curiosity?
I don't know the exact width off the top of my head, but in most locations, it's almost wide enough for a 4-lane road, almost.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be so bold as to say it's exactly wide enough for today's current standards for a 4-lane facility. And at some of the current cross streets, there is right of way at least a couple of those that was originally laid out for some grade separation type features, not at all, but at several. We'd have to pull the plans to give you exact details on that. But it varies down the corridor, but it's wider than you would think it is.
That's great. I don't need any more detail. That's actually very cool. Thanks. That does it for me.
All right, thanks Adam, Michelle, and Stephen. If there's no other questions about upcoming regional studies, we'll move on to our next item, which is 7L, the TAC bylaws update. Stacy? Stacy, are you there?
Hey, Alex, this is Adam. It looks like she might be having some trouble with her audio. I see her in the meeting room, so I'm going to go ahead and tee this up if that's okay, and then I'll let Stacy interrupt me if she can get connected here. So I think what we had done, we had put forward a proposed revision to the TAC bylaws last month, and this is for remote participation. So I will quickly pull up the draft. We have not made any adjustments to this since last month, but basically this would add 2 new sections to Article 7, and this, again, is a policy for participating remotely for TAC meetings, and then, of course, during a state of emergency like we're in now, how we can conduct those. And so We have not received, I believe, any comments from TAC members on these proposed revisions since last month, and so we wanted to put these forward and see if the committee would consider this for action this month.
Alex, this is Eric. I move for adoption.
This is Paul. I second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to adopt the adjustments to the bylaws. Is there any further discussion? All right, well, hearing none, all those in favor of amending the bylaws as presented, say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion passes and the new bylaws will be adopted. All right, next, number 8, correspondence. Adam, have we received any correspondence?
Yeah, we don't have any correspondence, and then I'll jump down to staff reports if that's okay. We just have one, and this is a new calendar that is current as of right now, so this spells out the rest of the FY21 fiscal year. And that's all we have.
Okay, great. Back to my names here. Let's see. I think we're on what, staff reports now? Member reports, yeah, staff reports. Anything from FAMPO staff?
Sorry, Alex, no.
Okay. All right, any members wishing to give any reports?
I have a couple quick things for DRPT.
Certainly.
So our draft FY21 SIP has been posted on our website for public comment. We'll also open our FY22 application cycle on December 1st, and it'll remain open through February 1st. And we're holding a couple workshops to review the FY21 award process and then the FY22 application process. So on November 11th, we'll have our human service transportation, that's the 5310 programs and the state senior programs. And then December 1st, we'll be holding our public transportation and special programs, as well as our commuter assistance program. And that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Sierra. Does anyone else have any reports?
This is Paul from Spotsylvania. I did have a question regarding the Route 1 corridor study in Massaponax. I think it's Commonwealth Drive down to the Caroline County line. And the question would be for VDOT. Do you know if there are any kind of meetings for that study coming up soon?
Hey, Paul, I don't know if you can hear me. I had trouble with my phone right there.
I can hear you.
Tell you what, let me get Linda to get back to you on that. I'll have her get in touch with you right after the meeting.
That's great. Yeah, and I guess if she could also just give maybe a status update on the study, like how far along it is.
Yes,
that'd
sir.
be great. Thank you. That's it.
Paul, you were aware we posted back in the spring some information online for a virtual public meeting, correct?
Yes. I guess we were kind of looking forward to seeing kind of what the recommendations were for alternatives.
Okay.
And I guess I haven't seen that yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, well, if there are no more reports by members, I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, our meeting is adjourned and we will meet next back on January 4th at 9:30.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.